I'm Katie.
I'm Garet.
And this is The Bar is Ankle High. We have a ton of new listeners. That's pretty exciting. Yeah.
That is so exciting.
So if you're new, welcome. That's cool. Share us with everyone you know. They don't care. They just like to hear from you.
I love the statements that you're making about other people's interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
With such confidence.
I mean,
it tracks. They won't care. They'll love it.
Yeah. They love hearing from you, and especially stuff that you're interested in, like this super cool podcast. Also, remember our merch is at bit.ly/anklehighmerch, all one word. And you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thebarisAnkleHigh.
Am I the only person who thinks bit.ly when they see that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, you're not the only person. Like,
am I the only one? Yes. I mean, no.
I do that to you constantly on this podcast. I don't know what the problem is.
Oh, it just kills me. It's so funny.
I think it's supposed to be like bit.ly, but there's a dot in the middle.
Yeah.
Bit.ly.
Bit.ly.
Right?
Yeah.
How else would you pronounce it? Biddle? No, it would be bit.ly.
Biddle. E.
He's going to cut this out.
It's like we can sense it too. As soon as it happens, we're like, oh, we've reached the point where it's going to get cut. I did get a commentary the other day. Hey, just so you know, I did cut a line. You said gangrenous flappy doodles. And I was like, I got really offended. Why did you cut that? And he was like, well, first of all, it didn't have to do with what you were talking about. Second of all, it was disgusting.
Well, he can't.
Whatever you're about to say, I had the same attitude. I was like, yeah, well, you know what?
Doesn't matter. He can't cut it out this time because gangrenous flappy doodles just got sentenced to another 16 years in prison.
Yeah, the same day that R. Kelly got sentenced. Yeah,
fuck them doodles.
It was a good day to not be a gangrenous flappy doodle, which is every day.
Yeah, but it was a good day for women for sure.
Yes.
I got pretty upset when I was reading that R. Kelly's defense team was arguing that anything more than like a 5-year sentence would be tantamount to a life sentence because, quote, most of his crimes were committed when he was much younger. And I was like,
that's not
I don't think that that's the case. Like, in fact, I would argue that he's even more of a predator if you don't punish him after convicting him of something. Like, what the fuck? The guy doesn't care that he can't own guns or vote. Like,
yeah. And it's not like he was 10 when he was committing these. I mean, he probably was when he was doing sketchy shit, but
I got really mad. I was like,
absolutely not.
Yeah, I was salty AF. But anyway, what a day to be gangrene. And so today we are talking about PTSD. So I'm not going to be going into, like, I personally have PTSD. I'm not going to be describing my own situation that caused PTSD, but we will be touching on some things that can cause PTSD. So if you're not comfortable with discussions of violence or intimate partner violence in particular, totally fine. I get it. But just, trigger warning at the top. And if you're in a dangerous relationship or you know somebody who's in a dangerous relationship, you can go to thehotline.org. That doesn't leave a digital footprint at all. or you can text START to 88788 in the US, or you can call 1-800-799-7233. Okay, on to the content.
Here we go.
PTSD is a disorder that, well, first of all, it stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, but it develops in some people who have experienced a shocking, scary, or dangerous event. The the PTSD Alliance estimates that 70% of all adults have experienced at least one traumatic event in their lives. And of those 70%, 20% will develop PTSD.
Wow, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Only about half of those individuals who develop PTSD will ever reach out for help.
Oh my
Um,
god.
mhm.
I'm sorry. I'll let you finish.
No, the numbers are wild. The
That is a lot,
National
yeah.
Center for PTSD, that's nestled within the Department of Veterans Affairs in the US, reports that 7 to 8% of all people will experience PTSD at some point in their lives. Women are more likely to develop PTSD than men, and genetics can play a part in determining whether you're more likely than not to develop PTSD.
Hmm.
So, I didn't see anything specific, but that stat that women are more likely to develop PTSD, I'm just wondering if it's just that women are more likely to report that they're struggling with it rather than actually being more likely to develop it.
And how often
Um,
are women more likely to be a survivor of something that would cause PTSD versus
exactly.
being the party to cause the PTSD?
Right.
And I also
Yes.
just like while we're setting this up, I read actually, you know what it was is after January 6th, AOC was talking about she described trauma as too much, too fast, too soon. And I thought that
Mhm.
that was just like a really good way to summarize because
Yeah.
there's such like an array of things that can cause traumatic events for people that was just like a good way of
Yes. Yeah,
summarizing it.
for sure. Um, and in preparation for this episode, I've been listening to the audiobook of The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. Highly recommend. So, so good. That is about kind of relying on that intuition where you're like, something's off. Like, I don't know what it is.
Mm,
Like, I just don't like that person. And it's like talking about how the author, Gavin DeBecker, has this company where he helps people overcome their trauma and identify, like, kind of learn how to trust themselves again and realize that, like, it's not their fault what happened to them, of course, but also there were different things along the way that tipped off their, like, lizard brain that this wasn't okay and that something
mhm.
else was wrong, and they just ignored it, either because they know that they're expected to smile and be nice or whatever.
Or they're
Um,
just being paranoid, or somebody else that they know told them that this person was okay and that they trust them. And
right,
yeah,
and also, I mean, he's obviously only talking to survivors, so he's also talking people through how they got to a point where they actually ended up trusting that intuition, and that's how they managed to survive.
yeah, yeah.
And he starts the book off with the story of this woman, Kelly, I think is the name he gives her. And she's attacked by somebody who got into her secured apartment building, and when he was done attacking her, he got up and he had a gun with him the whole time, and closed her bedroom window and said, "I'm just going to go to the kitchen and get a drink, but I'm not going to hurt you, I promise." And for whatever reason, she got up. She was like, "Okay, I trust you," and got up and, like, tiptoed along with him in the hallway behind him. And then when he went into the kitchen, she went out the door to her neighbor's apartment that she knew wouldn't have a locked door and, like, went in. And that's how she survived, because he
Damn.
was in the kitchen looking for a knife. And he, like,
Ugh.
talked her yeah, he, like, talked her through, like, why, like, he said, "I promise." And one of the things is, like, making a superfluous promise, because normal people don't need to promise you that they're not gonna hurt you.
Right.
Right.
After I just broke into your apartment.
Right, yeah, and assaulted you for 3 hours.
Right, like, "Sir, why else are you here?"
But it was that he closed the window and he had a gun. So he's like, "I'm not gonna hurt you with the gun, like, don't worry," and closes the window, and, like, that even though she didn't acknowledge it in the moment, her brain was like, "We're outta here." Like,
Yeah.
absolutely not. But I'll get to kind of healing in the at the end, but it's just such an amazing book, I can't recommend it enough, and he does the narration for the audiobook, so it's really nice to kind of hear it told the way the author wants it to be told.
I love when the author does their own, um, audiobook recording.
Yeah, it's very well done, and he did the audiobook in particular has a, like, newer forward that he wrote in 2021, so it talks about, like, the pandemic and,
Mhm.
like, lockdown trauma and stuff
Mhm.
like that, and so but he says, like, the he's like, "Yes, it's 2021, but I'm going to be using gendered language because he originally wrote the book in, like, the '90s." He's like, "I wrote this book
That's really far
almost."
ahead of, like, when those conversations really started happening.
Right. He's like, "I wrote this book 25 years ago, but the stats are not different. Women presenting individuals are overwhelmingly the victim of violence by men or male
Mhm.
presenting individuals, so those are the
Not
pronouns
all
that I'm using."
men.
Right, exactly, except for, in all the statistics.
Yeah.
So, in any event, um, it's just an excellent book. I highly recommend it if you're listening and you want some more information or you just kind of want to delve into that. I think it's just a great resource, and that idea of, like, like, you're not crazy, like, to just be, like, having a weird, experience, and it kind of just, like, validates I think especially as women, like, that feeling of, like, "No, don't help me with my bags."
Mhm.
Like, there's a different, like, and he says at some point in the book, like, men who don't hurt women don't bother to help you because they know you probably don't need help,
Right.
and if they are offering to help you, they're not fucking weird about it, like, they don't insist that you accept their help,
Right.
like, because that's crazy.
Right.
So, but yeah, so it's just so anyway, only 7 to 8% of all people will experience PTSD at some point in their lives, but it's not just the result of a physical assault. It can be a car accident. It can be, a traumatic medical event if you have, like, a sudden health
Mhm.
crisis. But the fear you experience in that moment triggers a split-second change in your body's chemistry to help you defend against the danger. However, people who develop PTSD um, can also, or people who develop PTSD can also develop it after a friend or family member experiences the danger.
Mm.
So, if I'm sure that some of my family has some unresolved trauma from what happened to me, um, but not everyone who lives through a dangerous event will develop PTSD. So just because, um, and I'll go through, like, what the actual diagnostic criteria for PTSD is a little bit later
Mhm.
on. So, as I said, the it's that split second change in your body to help you defend against the perceived danger, which is what we all know as the fight or flight response. It's an automatic physiological reaction to an event that is perceived as stressful or frightening. Perception of a threat activates the sympathetic nervous system and triggers an acute stress response that prepares the body to fight or flee. So, we talked about it, I mean, like episode 1.
Mhm.
Um, the amygdala, uh, the part of the brain that's responsible for emotional processing and for interpreting images and sounds, sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus when danger is perceived. The hypothalamus is like a command center for your body and controls your involuntary bodily functions like breathing and digestion. The automatic nervous system has a sympathetic part, which is like the gas pedal for the human body, which is responsible for bursts of energy. And the parasympathetic nervous system is like the brake pedal that focuses on the rest and digest functions and calms the body down after danger has passed. So, fight or flight was actually first described and coined by this is a hell of a title. American physiologist Walter Bradford Cannon in the book titled Bodily Changes in Pain, Hunger, Fear, and Rage, published
That also sounds like my autobiography.
a memoir of when I'm hangry.
Oh.
Published in 1915 when he
Oh, damn.
noted, yeah, he was studying actually animals, and he noted that when animals were threatened, their bodies released more adrenaline, epinephrine, which then caused a series of bodily changes, including increased heart rate and respiration. He noted that these reactions happened automatically and served the purpose of helping the animal survive the threatening situation by readying the body for fighting or running.
That's what Sophie just did. She
Yeah,
was
and
like,
then
"Do I
Cole.
wanna yeet myself across the room or do I wanna jump off the bed?"
Come here. Come here. Being annoying. Come on. All right. Well, I tried.
Don't worry, in like 30 seconds, she's gonna be like, "Pick me up."
Arms up like a toddler. I love my life. Anyway.
And it is like you think about times where you get an adrenaline rush, like you're driving and you almost get into an accident or
Yeah,
something. Like when it's a near miss, how long it takes you to come down from that,
right.
let alone when there's a more enduring threat where it wasn't like I did this and I missed it, but when it's something that it's not an avoidant and you have that experience, you think about that adrenaline rush is like so much more intense and like
For sure.
prolonged, like of course that leaves like an imprint.
Yeah. I mean, and I've had actual car accidents before, and you feel really shaky afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, and it's the adrenaline that
Yep.
just is because you're not really in generally immediate physical danger where if you're out walking around. None of my car accidents anyway have been like that, but you still have that like trembling thing, and
Yep.
like it can be
That
very
like cold
overwhelming very
sweat
quickly.
feeling or
Yes.
flushing and pounding heart. I mean, it's your pupils getting really big. Like you think about all the things like from an evolutionary standpoint, your body doing all of these things to like make sure you're hearing everything, seeing everything, assessing everything around you to like save yourself. It's just like it's a really just from like a biology perspective, it's like very interesting.
Oh, yes,
These
I have a full list,
Oh
actually.
yeah. Proceed.
Excellent Sagoo.
You know me and my sagoos. Oh, that's a new one. I love that, by the way. Thank gob.
Um, physiologically I know it's segue, guys, I'm not an idiot.
Yeah, we know.
God. Physiologically speaking, though, when you trigger that sympathetic nervous system, the uh, things that your body takes care of that are involuntary, that will it's marked by an increased heart rate, dilation of the blood vessels that serve muscles, and constriction of blood vessels serving digestion. Blood shunted from skeleton to the skeletal muscles and brain, increased oxygen to the heart and lungs, dilation of bronchi, and increased respiration rate. Your skin can become pale or flushed depending on where your blood is flowing. And, like you said, dilation of the pupils, which is attributed to allowing you to see better and have better visual acuity.
That's just amazing to me that your body
And they
like
all happen like
split second.
instantaneously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that is just so amazing to me
Oh,
that your
totally.
body just
Handles it, basically.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Um,
blown away.
yeah. So all of that happens though because the hypothalamus activates the adrenal glands, our old friends from hormones,
Yeah, we've met.
and dirty bitch, which respond by pumping epinephrine, aka adrenaline, into the bloodstream. Epinephrine also triggers the release of glucose and fats from temporary storage sites in the body. So, physiologically, you can experience, or psychologically rather, you can experience racing thoughts and attentional focus on salient targets to identify the source of the threat and avenues of escape. Secondarily, you can also start apprising your physiological responses, which for folks with panic disorders, that means that you can like feel your heart racing and then take that as a sign that you're having a cardiac event.
Mm,
So, you'll have like that secondary B roll of thoughts of like, okay, I already ate, I don't need to eat, I can keep running. My heart's pounding. If I don't stop running, my heart will explode. Like you can
mhm.
have a whole sorts, all sorts of things. So as that initial surge of adrenaline subsides, the hypothalamus will then activate the second component of the stress response system known as the HPA axis. It's a network made up of the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and adrenal glands. This network relies on a series of hormonal signals to keep the sympathetic nervous system, aka gas pedal, pressed down. So if your brain is continuing to perceive that threat, if it's not just a car accident or getting scared at a haunted house, if your brain is continuing to perceive a threat, this HPA axis is activated and releases the corticotropin releasing hormone, uh, which travels to the pituitary gland and triggers the release of adrenocorticotropic hormone. That hormone then goes to the adrenal glands and causes them to produce cortisol, which allows the body to stay on high alert. Cortisol.
A plus in pronunciation, by the way.
Thank you. I absolutely wrote it out.
I can't remember what that one that I couldn't remember uh somebody writing with a pen name pseudonymous or
Oh, yeah. Fuck that word.
yeah. Oof.
It's not real.
It's fake. Made up. Stupid word. Anyway,
Yeah.
good job on
Like,
hormone pronunciations.
thank you. Um, cortisol is that essential hormone that affects almost every organ and tissue in your body, actually. It's a type of steroid hormone and it suppresses inflammation, but also affects your sleep cycles. In addition to regulating your stress response, cortisol triggers your liver to release glucose stores for fast energy during times of stress. But this also means that cortisol is the opposite of insulin and the work your pancreas does, meaning that chronically high cortisol levels can lead to persistent high blood sugar and potentially cause type 2 diabetes. Extended periods of high cortisol levels can cause weight gain, especially in your face and abdomen, fatty deposits between your shoulder blades, wide stretch marks on your abdomen, muscle weakness in your arms and thighs, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, excessive hair growth in AFAB individuals, and osteoporosis and fractures.
God damn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, on like a shorter term basis, what we were talking about in other episodes were causing water retention.
Yes. So, because in addition to triggering your liver to release those glucose stores, it also increases storage of unused nutrients as fat. So even as you're eating food normally, your body is poised to store it all, leading to weight gain, which of course, doesn't make you feel any less stressed at all. Like why?
Right. And
Hmm.
then you get this nice little feedback loop of
Exactly. Yeah.
stress, water retention, weight gain
Right. Yeah.
until you give yourself diabetes. It's a nice little
Basically.
cycle. Yeah, that's good.
So, persistent epinephrine surges, like a firefighter having to constantly run into burning buildings, for example, can damage blood vessels and arteries, increase blood pressure, and raise the risk of heart attack and stroke.
Wild.
I know.
Like sustained
In
stress is that's why, when you go to the doctor and they're asking about your stress level, you're kind of like roll your eyes like, no, I'm not stressed. But like you really think about the long term. Like I
right.
feel like the best example is when you see a portrait of a president on the like at the beginning of their
Yes.
term versus like the end of a 2-term presidency, how much it ages them. Like the high stress does it's like smoking or being out in
Yeah.
the sun a lot. Like it really ages you significantly.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And,
Plus
you
the
know,
physiological stress on your body.
exactly. So, there's also that idea of when you are putting on weight, your heart is just going to be working harder anyway to do basic things like carry your groceries inside the house or whatever. Um,
If you're like me right now, going up the stairs. Any number of stairs, really.
I don't know if that's because of cortisol levels or
Yes.
just the bebe. Baby Shrek. We're
Oh,
shopping names for Garrett's baby, if you haven't guessed by that little interaction, folks. And apparently, Donkey was overruled by her spouse. So,
as was Fiona, because
yeah,
we couldn't name a
Princess
child
Fiona.
after an ogre, which is fair. Like I get it, fine, whatever. I'll let go. But for a hot minute there, I like it.
Donkey!
Shrek was also overruled, but
Whatever.
if she's green, I don't know what to tell him.
Well, so it is a girl.
Yeah, I guess. Whoops. Actually, if she's green, I guess there's like a slew of problems.
Yeah, it's like
Anyway,
extra jaundice when you turn green. You're like
yeah.
a brand new banana. Name it banana.
No.
Okay.
What's next? No, banana's getting added to the list of no thank you.
Well, I don't know what to tell you. You've already vetoed Gandalf and Shaq. So,
Apparently, you can't name your child gangrenous flappy doodles either, but whatever.
um okay, so chronic low level stress like hating your job or taking care of a sick family member keeps that HPA axis. I keep saying it weird. HPA axis activated, which can result in suffering from health problems associated with chronic stress as well. Um, in 2010, Shower and Elbert posted a more modern interpretation of the fight or flight response, which provided a more elaborate model of the physiological, psychological, and behavioral responses to threat and coined the term defense cascade. These researchers expanded on fight or flight to include freeze, flight, fight, fright, flag, and faint.
Oh, I
So,
definitely wouldn't have been able to get through that list. Good job. Woof.
okay, a note on fainting. I found a paper referring to fainting as a party of the quote Paleolithic threat hypothesis, which argued that the sight of blood or a sharp object coming towards you, as is the case in the fear of needles, that can cause fainting as an evolutionary response. For
I've
what it's
never
worth,
fainted.
me neither. But I know that it's a common thing when people see blood or like a fear of needles.
Yeah.
Like basically they were saying like it's just evolution, like it's just like it makes sense
It means you're
why
part goat, like
you
those
just
fainting goats.
scream.
Then your legs go stiff and you tip over.
Um in the Steve Carell and Paul Rudd movie Dinner for Schmucks, Steve Carell was getting attacked by a woman and he pretended to like pass out and she stopped attacking him and his explanation was that it's instinctual, humans don't want to hit something that's already dead. And without going into details can confirm that that works. So
Oh shit.
yeah,
Oh, is that
if
like
you're
why I wonder if that's why they tell you to like play dead, like if there's a bear.
yep.
Don't they tell you to do that with
I don't
bears?
know if that necessarily, I think it depends on
Also,
the
don't
bear.
use this advice to survive a bear attack.
Yeah, that's not advice.
This is just me thinking out loud
Yeah.
irresponsibly.
Um, I think it depends on the bear because a like polar bear or a grizzly bear will eat scavenged meals. So
Yogi Bear eat? I'm sorry.
that's a cartoon. I
If I look like a picnic
You're
basket,
asking me if
what will I do?
the man who wanted a picnic basket would eat a human playing dead? Is that what you're asking me?
Oh god. Oh, I'm trying to make a dark topic funny, and it's
You did good.
ooh, thank you. Ooh, I really didn't think Yogi Bear was gonna come up, but, you know, here we are.
Oh my god. So, no, I have no fucking clue if you're
Yeah.
supposed to play dead for a bear. I'm pretty sure you're not.
Wait.
So, did you Google the solution, or were you
Oh,
waiting for me
no.
to do that?
I definitely didn't. You mean, about bears? How to survive a bear
Yeah.
attack? No, I didn't.
Should you play dead in front of a bear?
I feel like one is you're supposed to make yourself look big and not run because they can run super fast.
According to the National Park Service, in an article called Staying Safe Around Bears. um this is wild. Okay, once a bear has noticed you and is paying attention to you, additional strategies can help prevent the situation from escalating. Um, one, identify yourself by
Hi, I'm Garet.
talking
It's nice to meet you.
by talking calmly so the bear knows you are a human and not a prey animal.
Okay, but I feel like the whole setup here is that I am prey even as a human.
Yes. Remain still, stand your ground, but slowly wave your arms. So I think you have to do the angels in the outfield sign.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. Perfect.
And then you have Danny Glover saying, "You got an angel with you right now." And then uh,
Absurd.
and it may come closer or help the bear recognize you as a human. It may come closer or stand on its hind legs to get a better look or smell. A standing bear is usually curious, not threatening.
I
Point 2.
disagree.
Yeah. Point 2, stay calm and remember that most bears do not want to attack you. They usually just want to be left alone. Um Bears may bluff their way out of an encounter by charging and then turning away at the last second. Tell you what, that's an excellent way to bluff my underwear into holding a bunch of shit inside of it. Because
100%. How do you
holy
not like
shit.
and that's where I would definitely die from a bear attack because I would immediately run and they're super fast.
A scream or sudden movement may trigger an attack.
I'm
Never never
doomed.
imitate bear sounds or make high-pitched squeals. Pick
Oh,
up small
done.
children immediately.
I'm absolute toast.
It says slowly wave your arms above your head and then tell the bear to back off.
But don't growl at it and don't say it in a high-pitched voice. Oh,
Right.
god.
Also, it says do not run, but if the bear follows, stop and hold your ground. Bears can run as fast as a racehorse, both uphill and down. Absolutely
Yeah.
not.
I feel like I read a thing, they said that they can run faster uphill than they can, like, on flat land.
That's fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Uh, holy crap. If you are attacked, they also said don't drop your pack as it can provide protection for your back if
Ah!
you're
When you get mauled?
Yeah, and then
Oh.
specifically for brown and grizzly bears, if you're attacked, leave your pack on and play dead. Lay flat on your stomach with your hands clasped behind your back.
Yeah,
Spread
so
your
that you can, like,
legs to
protect your
make it.
neck.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like don't know why I read bear attack survival tips, like, fairly recently, so
I don't know why you did that either.
I don't know.
I
I don't
thought
know
you said
what
you were on Zoloft.
How did it come up?
I don't know, but you're supposed to also spread your legs to make it harder for the bear to turn you over and remain still until the bear leaves the area. Fighting usually increases the intensity of such attacks. But if the attack persists, fight back vigorously. Use whatever you have at hand to hit the bear in the face. Well, I don't know where else I would hit it because I imagine if a bear opens its mouth, it's covering my whole head. Like, I just assume it can just swallow me in one bite.
I feel like my only thing that will
And for
ever
black
get me
bears, do not play dead, by the way. So,
my parents were camping one time and a bear came onto the campsite during the night. So they're like sleeping in a tent. And my mom said that like the bear's nose, like they sniffed all along the edge of the tent. So they're like asleep. And she said the bear is like sniffing like completely around like the whole thing. She's like, they had to just stay like perfectly still. And she said she was like cold sweat. That's a fight or flight where you can do neither. You literally just have to stay
right.
completely still and quiet.
Holy shit. That's wild. So anyway, I guess, yeah, if you see a brown bear, play dead. And if you see a black bear, run for your life is the tip.
I thought black
And
bears didn't fuck with people.
apparently
Oh,
they
sorry.
will. Um, if any bear attacks you in your tent or stalks you and then attacks you, do not play dead, fight back. If
Bear
this kind of
stalk?
attack is yeah, this kind of attack is very rare but can be serious because it often means the bear is looking for food and sees you as prey. And that concludes the National Geographic hour of the Bars Ankle High.
Damn. That's I'm way more afraid of bears now than I was.
Yeah,
I
I'm
wish I
way
could remember why I was looking at bear survival tips not that long ago. I don't know.
I don't know, man. You'll think about it later on when you're like making mac and cheese or something random.
Yeah. That's something I will probably be doing today, so I am
We
a carb
spend
now.
the exact right amount of time together.
If I'm not a bagel, I'm a mac and cheese. That's it. Those are the only two options.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so
Oh yeah, we were talking about fainting. I think that's how we got here.
oh yeah, no, we were talking about PTSD and stuff.
My bad. I
I
had to bring
literally
Yogi Bear into it.
I clearly thought that we would have some sort of side quest because my next note literally reads, "So, going back to how the brain works."
Oh no. It's almost like we've been here before.
Huh, interesting.
Deja vu.
The amygdala to hypothalamus discussion happens so quickly that the defense cascade thing starts before your vision center has finished fully processing what is happening. So, on the one hand, this is how people can pull their hand off of a hot pan right away without having to think about it. Like, and without necessarily registering that they touched a hot pan,
Right.
like they didn't see themselves touch it or whatever. On the other hand, when you've experienced a traumatic event like a violent car crash, and your brain continues to perceive a threat when there isn't one, that's when you end up with the long-term physical and psychological issues.
Right.
So, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, to be diagnosed with PTSD, an adult must have all of the following symptoms for at least 1 month. 1, at least one re-experiencing symptom like a flashback, bad dreams, or frightening thoughts. 2, at least one I'll get it.
You came in strong with the hormone names, and now
I did. I
normal
lost
words
it.
that you definitely know, doomed.
2, at least one avoidance symptom, like staying away from places, events, or objects that are reminders of the traumatic experience or avoiding thoughts or feelings related to that event. 3, at least 2 arousal and reactivity symptoms, such as being startled easily, feeling tense or on edge, having difficulty sleeping, or having angry outbursts. And 4, at least 2 cognition and mood symptoms, like trouble remembering key features of the traumatic event, negative thoughts about yourself or the world, distorted feelings like guilt or blame, and loss of interest in enjoyable activities. So you have to have all of those symptoms for at least a month. Um, I don't, I mean, the way I'm reading this, it's like in a 4-week period, you have to have one flashback, one instance of avoiding a place or event, 2 moments of angry outbursts or difficulty sleeping, and 2 uh like feelings of guilt in a 4-week period.
Which really,
Um
like, when you think about it, a 4-week period is not a super I mean, if you're experiencing these can feel so much longer than
right.
4 weeks, but really is not that long a period of time.
No, and all of these things, like if you have been in a traumatic car accident or something, or had a traumatic medical event,
Mhm.
you can have all those things in the week immediately following everything.
Yeah.
Um, and that's totally normal. A girl that I went to law school with had a car accident last fall, and she posted, I think she was T-boned or like she was pushed into somebody else and ended up getting T-boned. I don't know.
Mhm.
But it was like it totaled her car, and she posted something to her Instagram stories about like, and she was like all splotchy and had been crying, and she was like, I just keep crying on and off all day. And that's like
Oh,
a totally normal
yeah.
response though, because your
Yep.
body is trying to regulate the idea that you're not in trouble, but you're so hyped up that it
Yes.
takes time to come down from it. So, in order to kind of like flush out those hormones,
Mhm.
you're you have to like give yourself time to get through it. Um Also, side note, children can also have PTSD, but their symptoms look different. It can look like bedwetting, forgetting how or being unable to talk, acting out the scary event during playtime, and being unusually clingy with a parent or other adult.
Sometimes that gets misdiagnosed as ADHD also in kids.
Yes. Yep, yep, yep. We will get there.
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Spoiler Alert. I'm
Nice
just
to
gonna
meet you, Mr. Bear.
You said it was Yogi was your first name?
Huh. Interesting. Like loogie, but with a Y? Hmm, okay. Why do you say picnic like that?
Oh god.
Um, the thing with PTSD is that some or all of these symptoms, like I was saying, are normal for a few weeks after any traumatic event, but it's when they are persistent and last for more than a month, are not due to substance abuse, medical illness, or anything other than the event itself, that it could be PTSD. Some people with PTSD also report not displaying any symptoms for weeks or months after the event. So you may not have that initial, um, you may not feel like you're having that initial physiological reaction, but then later on it kind of sinks in.
Mhm.
And then you'll have those 4 symptoms of like flashbacks and avoiding places and being really startled easily and like not being able to enjoy stuff that you usually did before the event. And PTSD is also frequently accompanied by depression, substance abuse, or one or more other anxiety disorders. So, as I said at the beginning, I was listening to The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker in preparation for this episode. And he mentions that it's that initial triggering of your fight or flight response that gives you that gut feeling that something is wrong. But when you're walking at night and you already have your head on a swivel because you know the statistics, um, but when you have that feeling in the grocery store in the middle of the day, it's the same thing. It's just whether you're consciously choosing to be more alert or not is
Yeah.
like the like physiologically not that much of a difference,
Mhm.
but it's still your brain acknowledging that like something's
Right, it's like,
weird.
what's the cause? Is the cause because you're making a conscious choice that, yes, it could happen at any time, or are you doing it because you're constantly on edge and always in that state?
Right. And I think, one of the things that I really had to learn, because PTSD is also not necessarily a life sentence, it
Mhm.
you can get over it, for kinda lack of a better phrase, like, you can,
Process.
yeah, you can process it and move on, and I think, like, the the feeling that you somehow caused whatever happened to you, this fucking cat, I swear.
I'm watching her, like, and, like, related to what we're talking about, and I know I've mentioned it before, but, Nicole Sachs, the podcast, The Cure for Chronic Pain,
Yeah.
one of the things that she talks about is that the, like, ragey feelings that you can get or the always being on edge or, like, highly reactionary, responses to things can be caused by having, like, unresolved trauma, unresolved like, something that was triggering for you, or if there's something that was causing you a lot of stress or anxiety that you haven't processed. Until you process it, your body is just always going to be in that heightened state where you're kind of always in a fight or flight, and you're kind of always in that highly reactive, reactionary, state, which I know, like, for me personally, because I had a very I wouldn't say I had PTSD, but I had a extremely, difficult, stressful, uh, job situation that really took a toll on my mental health for a while. Um, Really, like, the pandemic kinda gave me the quiet space to work through that a little bit, and it helped using kind of her guidance on her podcast kinda helped with that because processing it made it so I was, like, really able to, like, work through some of that when, life is busy and it's hard to find quiet space to process things, I think sometimes.
Oh, totally. I think it's really hard to give yourself permission to take the space you need to
Mhm.
process that stuff. And I also think um at least for me, what I really had to learn how to do was how to forgive myself. And I think um a lot of times with a traumatic event, particularly, like intimate partner violence, I think a lot of the um advice from people meaning well is like, "Well, you can't carry that with you forever, you have to forgive them eventually." And, like, I'm sorry, but no, I fucking don't, and no, I won't. I won't
Yeah.
forgive
Right.
people for doing what they did to me, when I didn't deserve it. But I did need to learn how to forgive myself, and once I figured out that and how to do that, then I was able to really move out of having, uh, my primary PTSD symptoms constantly.
Mhm.
Um
Which is a hard thing to do, like, you think about it on even, like, simplistic levels. Like, you
Oh, yeah.
forget something at home, and you have to go back and get it, and how mad do you get at yourself?
Oh, totally, and I think, having ADHD makes it so much worse,
Yeah.
especially being undiagnosed. I think, because the masking that we do
Mhm.
makes it so much easier to blame yourself when she's attacking my hair.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think also the rumination,
Yes,
um,
and that's
you're
just
kinda
it,
just, like,
like,
looping.
yes, because you just think, like, it's that guilt blame cycle
Mhm.
of, "If I had just done this one thing differently, that never
Yep.
would have happened. If I had just done X instead of Y, then
Yep. If
this
I
wouldn't
had
have
been
happened."
smarter about this, or if I had been,
Right.
paid more attention to that.
If I had stopped at the yellow light instead of trying to make it,
Mhm.
or, whatever it is. Um, and it's the kind of thing where it's like, you can't, you know, it's natural to want to, because I think there's also this proclivity to saying, "Well, if if it comes down to it was my fault, then I can control that in the future." And the reality of it is, and I think part of that, like, rumination loop is that it's not your fault. You know that there's other drivers on the road that are outside of your control. There's people in your apartment building who leave the front door unlocked instead of making sure it closes securely. There's all sorts of things that you are not in control of.
Mhm.
And realistically, and like where you exist in the world, you're in control of like 0.5% of things.
Yeah.
So,
And with
but
the high anxiety that can be triggered by that, it's like when we were talking
yes.
about the justice sensitivity and that,
Mhm.
like,
Yes.
the bullets with the circle of control
Yes, and the
and
circle of influence and
yes, and,
yeah.
like, understanding and not even understanding, but, like, coming to terms with being out of control of so many factors
Yeah.
in that whole process of, forgiving yourself and knowing that certain things weren't your fault. Like, that's a when you're in a heightened state is so hard to do
Yes.
because it is so logical
Yeah,
and you're
like,
so not
intellectually, I knew it
logical.
wasn't
Right.
right. Like, I knew intellectually it wasn't my fault, like,
Mhm.
and that's the other thing of, like, everybody would say, it's, "This isn't your fault. You're a good person. This wasn't your fault," and that was the resounding chorus, but then there was also like, "Well, you just can't harbor that because 'cause that'll do more harm to you if you don't forgive them." No, I think it's perfectly fine that I don't forgive them.
Yeah, it's totally not about, like, forgiveness of them at
Yeah, no,
all.
I hope that that person gets chronic butthole spiders and,
Gangrenous flappy
chokes
doodles.
yeah, and, like, chokes on, genital warts that clog their throat. Like, that's what I
Perfect.
hope for that person.
Chef's kiss.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I don't wish anything good for them.
Yeah.
And, I mean, realistically, I'm sure that they don't wish anything good for me either.
But again, you know what? That's not within my axis of control.
Yeah, right, yeah, it's not, and I think, again, like, I mean, I was going to therapy weekly. Technically, I was only diagnosed with acute traumatic stress disorder because I got into a therapist's office within 2 weeks of what was my experience, so I wasn't within that post 1 month thing.
But that's wild too, because 2 weeks is like an eternity when you think about something like that.
Oh my god, it was a rough 2 weeks because all I could think was, like, "I'll never find somebody with an opening because this was pre-pandemic, like,
Yeah.
way pre-pandemic.
Yes.
So,
It's always been hard to find somebody with an opening.
yeah.
Always. Yeah.
Yeah, right, and, like, telehealth wasn't an option then.
Yep.
So, it wasn't, but yeah, no, it was wild. So, yeah, finally getting in somewhere. So, technically, I guess I don't officially have a PTSD diagnosis, but the fact that I get triggered every now and again
Yeah.
tells me everything I need to know.
Guess what? In 4 weeks?
But that being said, I mean, I'm almost 5 years post-incident personally, and I'm doing very, very well.
You are.
So it thanks.
Yeah. Good job.
Um, except for this fucking cat. Um,
Just waiting for her to turn and squint at the camera again.
yeah, I don't know what she's staring like
She's just
maybe there's
lording.
this
She's just lording
yeah.
over everyone.
I mean, there's a tree outside that window, but I don't think there's anything on it, but whatever. What do I know? I also can't clean the windows in my apartment because 'cause they're old-timey.
Oh, they don't fold in, so you can't clean the other
Right.
side. Yeah. So there's no
Um,
getting them clean.
right, yeah, so it's just it always looks like it's snowing because it's just
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, mine are dirty enough right now that same. Just haven't
yeah.
cleaned them in a super long time.
Um, so yeah, I don't know what she's looking at. But anyway, yeah, The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker, I highly recommend it. It's an easy listen. I usually will have, like, old episodes of podcasts that I've already listened to on in the background when I'm, like, cleaning and stuff, but that's been a good one, and one that I can listen to, um, like and, like, do laundry or leave my apartment without, like, risking having, like, a breakdown and, like, really getting in my feelings.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, highly recommend. Um, so yeah, also, again, as I said at the beginning, if you or someone you know is in a dangerous relationship, you can visit thehotline.org from your computer or mobile device without leaving a digital footprint. Or you can text START, START, to 88788, or you can call 1-800-799-7233. In the US, if you're struggling with thoughts of hurting yourself or others, you can call 988 to be put in touch with a trained crisis counselor um, any day, 24/7. This cat.
She's ridiculous.
She's
I
on
also
one today.
I wonder, like, when you mentioned genetics playing a factor, I wonder if, like, generational trauma, if that also then makes people, like, more susceptible to PTSD.
It
Um,
does. I
yeah,
have
because
stats.
they Oh, do you?
Yes.
Oh,
Captain Spoiler does it again.
can't help myself. If
um
you'd like to hire me to spoil an event for you, just let me know. Reach out to me on Instagram.
um yeah, so as you astutely segued for us.
At least there wasn't bears in this Sagoo.
That's true. There's a almost bear free. Um
Oh, God.
oh my god, we're turning into like Dwight Schrute. And so
Yeah. Beets. I do love beets.
bears beats PTSD.
Yeah.
Uh
BTSD. I'll see myself out.
so yeah, so why am I discussing this on an ADHD podcast? So some studies have actually found that when you have ADHD, you're 4 times more likely to also experience PTSD at some point in your life.
4
Yeah,
times?
I know.
That's significant.
Yes. Oh,
Damn.
I agree. I was surprised by that.
Yeah.
I found one article that reported comorbidity for ADHD and PTSD to range from 12 to 36% across the lifespan.
Wow.
So if you have ADHD, you're 12 to 36% more likely to also have PTSD, I
It
guess.
totally makes sense, though, because you think about, like, things that obviously we've discussed before, but that shortened response to things,
Yeah.
um, that makes sense that, like, you figure that adrenaline response, which is already, like, instantaneous,
Yeah.
you combine that with, like, a brain that already has, like, a
Yes.
hair trigger with something like that,
Right.
and then the inability to, like, settle after, and then being caught in that loop of rumination, like, it 100% makes sense.
And for to have a underdeveloped or late developing prefrontal cortex
Yep.
that affects your ability to visually interpret what's happening around you. So you could be perceiving something as, you know, a threat, like you said with RSD, like you're perceiving something as a threat that's not a threat. And so
Mhm.
you're having a symptom of my friend doesn't want to be my friend anymore. They don't want to hang out with me anymore. And like the reality is like their aunt is in town and they just have to spend time with their aunt. Like it's not,
Yep.
you know, like it's I
Yep.
was actually watching an episode of Bob's Burgers this morning, and it was one of the Thanksgiving episodes where Gail thought that Mr. Frond broke up with her because he was going to spend Thanksgiving with his aunt. And she was like, "It's just an excuse. He hates me." I mean, who spends Thanksgiving with their aunt? And Tina's like, you know that you're our aunt, right?" And she was like, "Oh, do you think he was telling the truth?"
Gail. That episode where they're spending time in her apartment, and then Bob goes to, like, get them in the snowstorm.
That was the one.
Oh, was it? Oh,
Yeah, and she has
so
to, like,
good.
bring her cat in a box so that he
Yes.
doesn't get lonely or something, and she's
Yes.
pretending to have broken her leg. So
Yes. Oh my god.
yeah, no, that
So
was the
good.
one.
That's a funny one.
Yeah, I was cracking up. But yeah, so symptoms of ADHD and symptoms of PTSD, that can make getting a diagnosis for either really difficult include difficulty concentrating and learning, easily distracted, trouble listening or seems like you're not listening, disorganization, hyperactivity, restlessness, and difficulty sleeping. So, especially among children that are potentially being diagnosed for ADHD, which could be valid, they could also just be dealing with PTSD.
Right.
So, studies have found that those of us with ADHD have a significantly greater, quote, insular cortex activation, unquote, during fear conditioning and extinction protocols, and greater hippocampal activation, indicating abnormality in the fear circuits in the brain, meaning the ADHD brain already mimics the PTSD brain at baseline.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
Right? Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I read it and I was like, oh, yeah, that I get it.
for
Like,
sure. Yeah.
totally. And studies researchers posited that this could help explain ADHD emotional dysregulation as well as the increased diagnosis of PTSD in people who already have ADHD.
Oh.
Because, as you just said, the ADHD brain is operating at a higher frequency to begin with. So once our amygdala is triggered through a traumatic event, our baseline is so significantly increased that it makes it so much harder for our brains to get back to a healthy baseline without suffering those physiological and psychological long-term effects.
Woof.
So you're a wizard, I guess. I don't know. You didn't
Just call me spoiler.
Children, as I said, can experience trauma that results in an ADHD diagnosis, but it could be PTSD disguised as ADHD and could be caused by living with an emotionally or physically abusive person, addiction in the home, physical conflict in the home, sustained physical hardship such as housing or food insecurity, witnessing or experiencing violence in your neighborhood or school, upsetting a separation from or the loss of a parent due to an overseas deployment, incarceration, CPS involvement, or death, suffering recurrent racism and discrimination as a minority or disabled individual. I'll refer you back to our episodes on racial medical bias, where we discuss that a little bit, and the emotional aftermath of a divorce. So, the continuous activation of an alarm state is harmful for your health, but for a child, it can overwhelm their developing emotional capacities so they can't achieve a level of self regulation that they otherwise might. And as a result, the child grows into an adult and tends to overinterpret problems or challenges as much more serious than they are. So the child, as an adult, can overreact to a mild insult or offhand remark, easily startle, have poor sleep, chronic anxiety, and overall poor health. And if this is you, it can feel like poor attention, impulsivity, up and down emotions, and you can feel easily overwhelmed by additional or unexpected stress. And then again, children with ADHD can also be subjected to additional trauma if they're not diagnosed, and their impulsivity, hyperactivity, emotional dysregulation can lead to them being over disciplined, thereby creating another cycle of trauma and stress response in their brain. And as we discussed in our medical racial bias episode, especially Black and brown children, at least in the US, are more often diagnosed with conduct disorders rather than ADHD or potentially PTSD. And so the interventions for those things are markedly different than the
Right,
interventions
punitive
for
instead of therapeutic.
exactly. So, treatments. Treatment is complex and it really varies depending on the patient and what your goals are. The important part of treating anxiety is to help the patient understand the purpose of the fight or flight response so that the patient can understand what is happening to their body and assess whether there is a genuine threat or a perceived threat, and that they can work on talking themselves off of that ledge. Medications, of course, speak to your doctor if you think that you're struggling with PTSD. It's plausible that they will.
What's going on over there?
I have a contractor bag of clothing that I've been slowly compiling, and Sophie just goes spelunking, checks it out. I swear. Shave me from my shelf.
I feel like I did read something about like when you experience a traumatic event that your like it stops your brain development. So you wind up like stuck in that stage where that occurred.
I think, based on what I read, that can be what happens. I think
Mhm.
of it more based on everything that I read. It's almost like the rings on a tree where they can see whether there was, like, a period of drought
Oh, that's a good way
or
to put it.
something.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not necessarily that, like, you just stop developing altogether, but if for whatever reason they could do that with the human brain, they would see a period where there was, like, an excessive deposit of adrenaline in your brain or something
Or if you're looking
to
at like
indi
an EKG, like
right,
that you can see when there's a spike or when something was different.
right, yeah. I think it's more like that. So it's and I that being said, though, the longer that period persists, you would
Yeah.
in a tree, those rings would be thinner, so the
Yeah.
tree won't be as strong or as big as it could be. So, at that same age or at the same age of its peers that are at that same age. So, yes and no. I don't think it necessarily stops if you're a child who's experienced trauma, I don't think it stops your development, but I do think that it perhaps stunts it
Mhm.
for that period that you're experiencing the trauma, and then the rest of your life, you are kind of potentially working at a little bit of a deficit and you have to make it up.
Which like same thing
Um,
with ADHD where they talk about how like parts of your brain are a little bit underdeveloped. So you wind up kind of playing catch up with peers.
right.
Man, there is a lot of overlap. That's wild.
Yeah. No, totally. And I think, for me, I mean, I know that I always had ADHD, but I think when I experienced PTSD, it made my ADHD symptoms so much more obvious.
Pronounced,
And I
yeah.
was yeah, I just wasn't able to mask them the way I used to. I wasn't able to cover up my inattentiveness and my impulsivity,
Yeah.
because I was already just at such a high frequency that I didn't have the bandwidth to say like, "Okay, Katie, put down your fucking phone
Yeah,
and
your
do your
brain's like,
job."
I'm doing enough.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah,
like
yeah.
my brain was just like, "I just need to not think about anything right now."
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was saying that to me 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, as we were saying, talk to your doctor if you think that an antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication would help you. Your doctor might also prescribe specific medications to address other symptoms, like a sleep medication if you're really struggling with sleep. Um,
Which if you have
and as
ADHD also, you may also be struggling with sleep.
right, and of course, it's also I think worth also talking to your doctor about whether you are self-medicating with alcohol or cannabis or some other recreational substance, because not only do they need to know that before they start prescribing you stuff, but it's possible that maybe you just need a support group to separate yourself from using that stuff for the time being while you get everything else under control.
Mhm.
Um, so, no tea, no shade. I mean, I still have wine, but there's definitely times where I've been like, I need to not drink wine. That is
Yes. I think it is
getting
time
to
for a
be a
wine
lot.
break.
Yeah. And that's also something that you can discuss with your therapist because we love CBT here. Um, I saw something that said talk therapy for PTSD usually lasts 6 to 12 weeks.
What?
Yeah,
Absolutely not.
I don't know if they meant like an inpatient situation.
Yeah, I mean, if you're putting me in Britney Spears therapy and I'm there for 8 hours a day, yeah, maybe 6 to 12 weeks.
Yeah, it was very
That
I was like,
just I've never seen something
Okay.
with a time frame on it like
I
that.
don't know, yeah, it was very strange, and there wasn't like an explanation of, like, there's a specific course of treatment for PTSD that your therapist should be working on you with. I have no idea, but it was just one of those things. I was like, "Oh, okay."
That's going on the same list as those ADHD tips that we read where it was like,
Like
cut
stamps?
recipes out of magazines and get your bug out bag ready for the end of days. No,
Yeah, make sure you
that's
have
not.
cash on hand, it's important.
Yeah,
Um,
because if the world ends, cash will be king.
yeah.
I rolled my eyes when I said that just for context.
If you couldn't hear it.
Yeah, if you couldn't hear my eye roll, there was an eye roll with it.
Um, According to the National Institute of Mental Health, effective therapy tends to emphasize a few key components, including education about your symptoms, teaching skills to help you identify triggers of symptoms, and teaching skills to manage those symptoms and control your reaction to those triggers. Can confirm I had to have my therapist actually say to me, like I was describing a situation, and she was like, "So you were triggered. That's what that was. That's why you like scream cried in your car afterwards."
You're
And I
like,
was
first
like,
of all, rude.
I was like, "Oh, that's what triggering means. Got it."
I
Because then
still experience things and I'm like, why did that make me so mad so fast?
yeah, totally. Which I find it's one of those things where it gets me so irritated when oftentimes conservatives on social media will be like, "Oh, are you triggered?" And it's like, I don't know. It's kind of like a dog whistle thing, obviously,
It's a
but
buzzword. It's just like calling people woke.
yeah, but it's one of those things where I feel like it's like that's a real thing. And so like on the
Yes.
one hand, people are who say it kind of nonchalantly where they were like, "LOL, I was triggered, so I had to do some shopping." And they don't mean it as a dog whistle as well, are doing like as much of a disservice to that phrase and to the acceptance of PTSD as like a real thing that happens to a lot of fucking people.
It's like OCD.
Yes.
People are like, "Oh, I'm really OCD, so I gotta clean." Like, no, you like a clean space.
Right, that's not OCD, and,
Right.
um, we'll cover that as well in the future, because I think that that's a common comorbidity with ADHD,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, so it's just one of those things where I was like, I actually I really did need somebody to point out to me that that was a trigger
Yeah,
because I didn't
that's a
realize what it
hard
was.
yeah, that's a hard thing to unpack too because you're not just saying like, "Oh, okay, this stimulus happened and it caused me to react this way." It's you immediately have to have an understanding of why. Because if you
Yeah,
don't have that context, it's not gonna make sense. Somebody said
totally.
something to you and it upset you, you're not gonna understand until you really have that full picture. I personally feel like just identifying triggers is that alone is like major growth because that's a really hard thing to do.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it does sneak up on you, like when PK and I first met, I was triggered by, like, him playing with me. Like,
Mhm.
like, made a motion, and it just caught me off guard and startled me, and, like, I was not okay for a few minutes, and it was not something that it would have even occurred to me to mention to him
Right.
because, like, I mean, he knew my past, but it wasn't something where I was like, "Okay, make sure that you don't do this around me." Now
Right.
he knows because he saw it in real time, but it wasn't something that I had encountered before because I don't go to haunted houses, and I don't
Yes. Right.
I don't go to things where people sneak up on me.
Yes.
I've never liked that. It
Right.
turns out
No.
now I really
Same.
don't like it.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the other thing too, like, there's sometimes even, like, on a very mundane level, like, my spouse will say something to me, and I'm immediately, like, in a foul mood. Just, like, this little offhanded comment, and I really
mm,
have to, like, take time to think about it. I'm like, "Oh, okay, because this person used to say something just like that to me, but they meant
mhm,
it this way." Um,
right.
so it's yeah, that's a hard thing, it's hard to put your finger on, and I mean, it also, like, evolves too as you get older.
Yeah,
There's things that you
definitely.
forgot about or things like really It's like that, what is that Supreme Court decision where they're like, "I can't describe pornography, but I know when I see it." Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like the same concept.
Yeah, I think it was Scalia that said that actually.
Oh, ew, I
Fucking
take it
piece
back.
of shit. Um,
Sorry for sorry.
yeah, talk about like a walking flappy doodle. My
Ugh,
goodness.
yeah.
Um,
Extra
and
gangrene for
so
that one.
CBT can also include exposure therapy, which can mean that you're imagining, writing about, or physically visiting the place where the traumatic event happened. And cognitive restructuring helps people make sense of the bad memories, which is especially helpful if you're struggling with guilt or shame around the event.
Mhm.
Um, in general, therapy can teach people about trauma and its effects, teach anger and relaxation control, provide tips for better sleep, diet, and exercise habits, and help you identify and deal with guilt, shame, and other feelings about the event and its aftermath, and can just help you change how you and the people around you react to your PTSD symptoms. Also, engaging in mild physical activity can help reduce stress, like going for a walk or doing like a YouTube yoga class if you're not comfortable being outside right now. Setting realistic goals for yourself, breaking up larger tasks into small ones, which we talked about. I think it was in our procrastination or time management episode. Um, how we put like the littlest things on our to-do list. Like we'll like for me, it's like laundry where I'm like, put laundry in washing machine, put laundry in dryer, fold laundry, put laundry away. And like I break it down into all these little tasks so that I can like cross them off one at a time. But
Yes.
it just helps your brain see it all planned out so that you don't have to ask your question of how am I going to do XYZ.
Yep.
Like it's not just the task, it's all these other little tasks and I can handle the little tasks.
Yeah, because I definitely have a tendency to procrastinate and avoid when something seems like too
Totally.
big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um and identify and seek out your comfort places and situations and people. And this tip was from something I read, but it was like expect your symptoms to improve gradually, not immediately. And I don't think that that only applies to PTSD. I think it applies to basically everything. I think healing, whether it's healing a broken bone or healing from a traumatic event, is almost never linear. Healing isn't linear, neither is growth in general. When a child learns to walk, they still fall down like all the time. Like they immediately fall down. They're real bad at it when they first learn how to
They suck
walk.
at walking.
Stupid baby. That baby's an idiot. I can't even walk.
Oh, what are you
um,
here?
but I mean, consider like even adults fall down sometimes, and theoretically they've been walking for years, decades even, and but you still like will just get back up and continue walking. Like
Mhm.
even if you scrape your knee, you're like, oh fuck, but you continue to do it. And so when it comes to healing from an injury, I think it's just really easy to forget that you'll have moments where you'll feel like you're back at square one or like you're not making any
Mm.
progress, and that's fully normal. Um, but in my personal experience, especially healing with PTSD, it will never be a linear process. Like you will like day to day, even within the same day, have like really big highs and then you could have a low and it just is what it is. And it's just part of like kind of the grieving process, I think.
Yeah.
Um, you have to go through those stages of grief and get to the point of acceptance, but it takes a long time, especially when it's not something, I guess, as simple as like a grandparent passing away from old age.
Mhm.
Like that's sad, but easy enough to accept when they're 90 and like,
Right, and the stages of grief really shouldn't be numbered because they don't necessarily happen in that order.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, that's pretty much all I have. Um if you have had an experience with PTSD, let us know. We can share it anonymously or keep your name in it. It's up to you. Our default, if you message us on Instagram, is uh, we'll share your story or your statement, but we'll redact your name or the names of people just in case.
Mm.
um, so you don't have to worry about somebody seeing it or whatever. Um, but yeah, that's all I have on PTSD. And, you know,
That was
be nice
excellent.
to yourself if you're going through this. There's no blueprint for how it's supposed to look or shake out. And, you know, you'll come out this other side, you know, the same as you were before, but maybe even a little bit better. And that's okay too.
Yeah, that was nice. Well, and
Thanks.
like, and not that like this doesn't apply to all situations, but even like bad experiences that I've had, this is going to sound like really shitty, but it totally doesn't apply to like really bad situations. But things that I've gone through, like I don't have a feeling of regret about them because I know that ultimately I grew from them. So like
Hmm.
even if it was horrific or even if it was sad or hard or really stressful or temporarily felt like it was like damaging, I think long term knowing that I grew and evolved after it or because of it or in spite of it, um that it ultimately helped me become like who I am now.
Yeah. I think another phrase that I heard a lot was like, well, everything happens for a reason.
Ugh,
Yeah, which I
I
don't
hate that one.
yeah, it thankfully people didn't say that to me like day 2, but I do agree with it in that same vein of what you said. Like, you know, you grew from it.
Mhm.
And, you know, I'm a completely different person than I was 5 years ago, personally and professionally.
Mhm.
I and I never would have met PK if it
Yep.
what happened to me hadn't happened to me and my life hadn't taken the turn that it took. So, as frustrating as it is and as much as I am dealing with the sequelae constantly, um, I don't you know, I think you can regret what happened to you without, um, shitting on who you are because of it.
Right, like I wish that there was a different way that I could have grown.
Right, like, if I could have ended up
Right.
exactly where I am now without having to go through all that,
Right.
I would have taken that option, like, absolutely.
Right.
Um, that's just not how it worked out for me this time, and I have you ever seen the Robin Williams movie, What Dreams May Come?
No.
It is excellent. It is one of my favorite movies, and in that movie, he, finds his soulmate, and they go through this whole journey, and this at the very beginning of the movie, it's him as a younger guy and his would-be wife, and he's like, "Oh, we met at the beach. She was sailing her boat, and she was wearing this red sweater." And, like, that's what I remember is, like, her in this red sweater and that smile. And then at the end of the movie, because they're soulmates, they're like, "Well, do you wanna try it again?" And it was like it whatever, screen fades, and then it comes back, and they're like children, and it's a voiceover saying, like, "I met her at the lake on the beach, and she was sailing her boat, and she's got, like, a toy boat that she's sailing,
Mhm.
and, like, she was wearing a red dress or something." So, like, all of those, like, key details were the same, it was just, like, a different location.
Mhm.
So, it was just one of those I think it provided great perspective and continues to provide great perspective, but it's that sort of thing where I'm like, I wonder if in another life, I'll still end up with who I'm supposed to be with,
Mhm.
just in a different way, and, mm, it's okay, like, I came out the other side, but, you know, I also worked really hard.
Yeah.
I was I was in weekly therapy for a year and a half,
Yeah.
basically, um, and, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yep.
I also took a second job so that I had, like, no time to be alone with my thoughts for a while, which was definitely not healthy, but it got me
No, but it's like sometimes it's getting yourself through. It's not like I need to
totally.
do what is the most because sometimes I do have a tendency to approach something from like such a practical perspective that it's like you're being just let yourself do what you need to do and don't
Mhm.
try and do everything perfectly.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so yeah, if you're going through this, my heart goes out to you. It doesn't have to be forever. Just know that you can get over it. And it'll probably happen when you don't realize it's happening.
And you also don't have to forgive everybody, and you can wish them a lifetime of butthole spiders
Yeah,
or bear attacks.
absolutely. Or bear attacks. Because the bar is ankle high.
Sometimes the bar is in hell. And sometimes along with that bar comes butthole spiders and gangrenous flappy doodles.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll be here next Thursday with a brand new episode to delight your brain juices. In the meantime, the best way to support us is to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast streaming platform. You can keep up with us during the week on Instagram and Facebook at The Bar is Ankle High and on Twitter at Ankle High Pod. If you want even more ankle high hot takes in your life and have a few dollars to spare, consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/thebarIsAnkleHigh. We post bonus episodes there full of our karaoke attempts, Am I the Asshole discussions, and wondering how we even managed to survive this long. Patreon subscribers also get exclusive access to our secret Patreon-only Facebook group and get added to our close friends list on Instagram. Until next week, remember to be kind to yourself because the bar is ankle high.